right. Hello, coaches, and welcome to our member continuing education for April 2019. This is for the book release, Inspire Accountability, with Coach Ken Estridge. So our guest speaker today is Coach Ken Estridge. He's from Massachusetts, US. He's been a 4Decisions certified coach since 2009. But also, Ken has been an executive coach for the past 17 years, coaching from mid-level to the CEO suite for more than 25 Fortune 500 companies. Ken brings over 40 years of experience as an entrepreneur, business leader, venture capitalist, management consultant, and an executive coach to his work with his clients and to the release of his new book, Inspire Accountability, the Breakthrough Workplace Transformation for 21st Century Leaders in the Age of Millennials. This book will be published tomorrow, April 9th, 2019, and as a special offer for the community, he is offering it for the first 5 days. The ebook version on Amazon will be free. So I'll go ahead and send that link out in the Yammer link to our Gravitas Coach community, and you can contact Ken Estridge if you are part of his community to get that link for the next few days. All right, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ken.
Technology is amazing these days. So thanks so much for this warm introduction, Michaela, and it's great to be here. Thank you for all of you who are sitting in on this webinar today. A number of people have asked me why there's a wave on the cover of my book. And it's because I really view the millennials as a wave that's transforming corporate culture in America. And for those of you who are under 40, you may think it's always been this way. But what you need to know is it hasn't always been this way, that when I started working many years ago, corporate culture was entirely different. People took jobs and worked pretty much nonstop at those jobs to get ahead. It was unheard of to come in for a job interview and ask if there was a ping pong table, or ask if you could have Friday afternoon beer parties, or ask if you could guarantee to be home with your family for dinner in the evening. We basically didn't talk about work-life balance. If you talked about work-life balance, they assumed you weren't a serious worker. So things have changed very radically in the past 15 to 20 years, and that's what we're talking about. I was at a Chinese restaurant the other day, and I got this wonderful fortune cookie that said, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. So I want you to think of today as kind of learning to surf, or surfing, at least dealing with millennial population. On Google, 27,300 people searched the question, why can't people just do their jobs? It's amazing that people are so frustrated, but apparently accountability is at an all-time low. According to the Gallup study in 2017 of the global workplace, 85% of workers are disengaged, and it's cost more than $7 trillion in lost productivity. And for those of you who are familiar with Patrick Lencioni's work, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, if you don't have accountability, you don't get results. So accountability is essential to producing desired results. The 3 questions I'll be answering today is, why is it so difficult to get employees, especially millennials, to be accountable? And what role does a leader's accountability play? And how can leaders improve accountability? So for those of you who are not that familiar with the accountability statistics, they were born between the ages of 1981 and 1996. That means their ages 23 to 38. They will be 50% of the US workforce by 2020 and 75% by 2025. And this percentage is much higher overseas in places like India and Africa and China. It's already 75% of the working population. They seek purpose and meaning in work, which may seem obvious, but it wasn't obvious years ago. Work-life balance is important to them. They're used to working when they want, where they want. They're task-oriented versus time-oriented. They figure if they get the job done, it doesn't matter when they do it. And they don't think they need to be in the office 8 to 5. So I remember when I took my first job working in Wall Street, and I was working in an office of an investment research firm. I was an investment research analyst, and I would work from 7 o'clock in the morning until midnight every day. And the only free time I had was Friday night and Saturday day, and Sunday I'd go back to work again to prepare for Monday. Back then we didn't have laptop computers, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have the internet, and I would go home with a stack of reading materials, sometimes 3 or 4 inches thick, to read that night in preparation for the next day. So work has changed a lot since then. When I look at millennials today, they present unique challenges. They really dance to a different drummer. They want work to be fun. And the notion that work has to be fun is really an oxymoron. When I started out in work, work was work and fun was fun, and the two didn't mix very much. So the fact that they want work to be fun means that they're not going to stay at a job or work for a boss that they don't love, and they don't push back, they just leave. They resign twice as often as older workers, and nearly a quarter of millennials are at a job for only 6 to 12 months before they look elsewhere. Their average employment length is 2 to 3 years. So I'm coaching a large medical staffing firm in New Hampshire, and almost all their workers are under the age of 40. When you take the top management team out of the equation, which is the top 8 people, their turnover of employees is 35% a year. That means that something like 50% of all the people that are in leadership roles have been there less than a year. It's staggering. They're constantly hiring new people, constantly training them, and constantly losing them, despite the fact that they've worked really hard to make themselves a best place to work. And they've created a really nice work environment. And they've done a lot of the things one thinks they should do. The fact is that millennials are very fickle when it comes to jobs. And when they learn that work is work, they don't always like it, and oftentimes they leave. The other thing about working with millennials is that command and control leadership doesn't work with them. They don't want to be managed. They want bosses who will be their mentors, not their managers. They think that you're there for them. You're there to mentor them, to coach them, to help them with their career. And the last thing they want from a manager is someone who's got their thumb on them, trying to hold them accountable. So it makes accountability a big challenge. The other thing is that many of them would sacrifice dollars to work at home some or all of part of the time. One of the firms I work with has offered people the ability to work at home 1 or 2 days a week if they want to take a cut in base pay and make it back up in commissions. And some people are bucking and saying, why should I take a cut in base pay? I'm still doing the work when I'm home. They value responsibility and empowerment over compensation. They have entitlement issues, and they expect to get promoted every 6 months. I coached one vice president of a large retail firm who had been a vice president for 10 years and had sort of made her peace with the fact that it was unlikely that she'd ever be promoted to SVP. You've got new people coming out of college and graduate school thinking every 6 months they're supposed to get a step up in their responsibilities and their titles. Last but not least, they have confidence issues. They need lots of positive feedback. I remember a time I was coaching the president of a $400 million division of a very large defense contractor. I went to interview him and I said, so what does your boss think of your work? And he said, I don't know. I said, what do you mean you don't know? He said, well, I've been in this job for 1.5 years and I've had no feedback. So I said, well, I'm going to go talk to your boss. So I went to talk to his boss, who was responsible for $3 billion of sales. This little $400 million division was the smallest of his 5 divisions that he oversaw. And when I asked him how my guy was doing, he said he's doing okay. No news is good news. I said, well, no news may be good news, but it's not very good leadership. He has no idea what he needs to work on. So particularly with millennials, you got to give them constant feedback and hopefully more positive than negative, because they're moving very quickly in an environment that's changing very quickly, and they're constantly being asked to do things they've never done before. Last but not least, low unemployment has caused the power balance to shift dramatically in the United States from employer to employee. When I entered the job market, you were lucky to get a good job, and when you got one, you did everything you could to hold on to it. Today, companies are finding it really hard to attract and retain good employees, especially in major cities. Whole industries like investment banking and law and finance and insurance and accounting are having a very hard time attracting and retaining employees. I was thinking the other day, I took my mom out for coffee and for a muffin at a Cafe Nero in Jamaica Plain, which is part of Boston. And we went there on a Sunday afternoon at about 3 o'clock, and every single seat in the cafe was taken by somebody with a laptop doing some work. And my mom turned to me, she's now 99 and a half years old, turned to me and said, are they high school students doing homework? I said, no. I said, they're all in their 20s and 30s doing work, but they want to do it in a social setting. And she couldn't comprehend how anybody could be sitting there with their laptop in a cafe on a Sunday afternoon. It was like alien to her. So if people behave in ways that are internally logical to them, and if you read the book Freakonomics, that's his thesis, which is that even when behavior looks illogical from the outside looking in, it always is logical from the inside looking out. So if people are behaving in ways that are logical to them, what's going on when accountability fails, when they don't do what you ask them to do? So after interviewing a lot of people, I developed this model I call the 7 C's. And the 7 C's are basically a structured interview process for asking about and thinking about and inquiring into what is it that's not working with this person or with this group of people. And the 7 C's, which I'll go into in a moment, are culture, clarity, capacity, competence, confidence, commitment or caring, and compensation. Any one of these, if it's out of whack, can cause someone not to be accountable. So let's start with culture. If the culture of the organization is preventing employees from speaking their truth or telling the boss what's going on for them, you as a boss will make wrong assumptions. You'll assume they're lazy or they're incompetent or they don't care, when in fact there may be something very different going on. So a prerequisite for understanding what's happening with people is creating a culture that makes it safe for people to speak their truth and talk about what's going on. And this may seem like an obvious statement, but I can't tell you how many large companies I've coached in where you never question authority, you never question an order. You just, when the boss says jump, you say how high. So the first thing is to get the culture of the organization open to input from everybody. The second C is clarity. And when clarity is an issue, there's a lack of clarity about what's expected by when or at what standard of excellence, or about what are the top priorities and what can wait until later. So often people are not sure whether it's got to be quick or perfect. They're not sure which of the many things you've asked them to do comes first, second, and third. They're not sure what they can really postpone until next week without any kind of fear of reprisal. So the responsibility for clarity rests with you, the leader. The third C is capacity. Oftentimes there's a lack of capacity to get things done in the time frame requested, a lack of manpower, a lack of resources, a lack of time. And oftentimes people are afraid to say that. When you ask someone to say it, they say, yes, boss. Then they walk out of the room muttering, how am I going to get that done? I've seen people sit through management and leadership meetings and you know, the CEO is busy telling everybody what to do and they all sit there nodding their heads and they go out and say, boy, that's crazy. It's never going to happen. So we need to know whether we have adequate capacity. And when we don't, we're putting a strain on the system. The next C is competence. Oftentimes there's a lack of competence on the part of employees to do the requested task. This doesn't mean they're incompetent. It means they may be incompetent to do the task that's expected. And all too often, people are hired to do one thing and asked to do something else. I know I've been guilty of this myself as a leader, where I hire people based on a certain set of skills and then I keep throwing new things at them, expecting them to learn on the job. Well, when you do that, you can't blame them if they're not competent. The question is, who's responsible for making sure they have the skills they need to be successful? An extension of competence is confidence. If they've never done it before, if this is the first time you're asking them to do something that's new and different, don't expect them to be highly confident. And millennials tend to have confidence issues because many of them live at home still. Many of them have been coddled by their parents. They've been told how wonderful they are since they were born. And they're used to people praising them a lot. And they get into a work environment where they don't get that. And their confidence begins to erode. And they feel like, what happens if I make a mistake or I fail? So part of this has to do with the culture of the business around failure. If it's safe to take risks and make mistakes, they may be a little more confident than if it's not. And oftentimes it's not. The biggest C, and the one that's hardest to fix, is what I call commitment or caring. If there's a lack of commitment or caring on the part of the employee toward their boss and or their company, because they don't feel cared about by their boss or their company, it's hard to turn that around. It's something that you can fix in the beginning, but once they've lost heart, they become disengaged and they start looking elsewhere. And most people join companies and leave bosses, and they feel like their boss isn't there for them. I coached a very senior executive at a large high-tech firm that shall not be named, and he had a boss who was a complete workaholic, who was working all the time, who would send him emails and texts at night and during the weekends and expected instant response, which meant that he had to be on all the time. He had 2 young daughters under the age of 10, and when there was a ballet recital, he wanted to be there. And one time, a customer wanted him to fly out of town for a meeting, and he told his boss he couldn't do it because he was going to his daughter's ballet recital. And the boss said, I never want to hear that from you. Your family comes second, your job comes first. And when a client says jump, you jump. And he did jump. He left the company and went to a competitor because he wasn't prepared to work for a boss who didn't care about his personal life outside of work. And the message he was getting is nothing matters but the tasks. So if you don't exhibit commitment or caring for people, they're not going to exhibit it for you. Last but not least is compensation. A lot of times people feel like they're not being paid for what they're being asked to do. They were hired to do one job. They had a certain expectation. Maybe they thought it would be 40 or 50 hours a week, and all of a sudden it's 60 or 70. This happens a lot with retail store managers where they were being paid hourly, and all of a sudden they're a manager on a fixed salary, and their 40-hour work becomes a 60-hour work with only minor increases in pay over what they get paid hourly. And if you actually calculate it on an hourly basis, they're making less money. But when you look at senior managers in large companies or senior managers even in small companies, they're being paid very well, but they still want to have a life. And particularly if they're millennials, they want to have a life. And so when you have a job where you're driving out, workaholic behavior, you can't expect people to feel committed to the business. Another example that I have from one of the companies I worked at, which I didn't discuss earlier when we were talking about capacity, is one of the companies I coached at was a large construction firm that was winning business faster than they could staff the business. They had been hiring people and training people, but they were short on project managers. And the boss was beating a drum saying, get more business, get more business, get more business. And the guy I was coaching, who was president of their largest division, was doing a phenomenal job on sales, but didn't have the project managers he needed to oversee the work effectively. So what happened when one project fell through one project didn't go on time, his boss was all over him saying, how come this project didn't go successfully? You're affecting our relationship with the key client. And he said, it's because you're asking me to drive sales faster than I can drive capacity. So you got to look at where the roots of these problems start. So in my opinion, when accountability fails, management hasn't paid attention to what really matters to employees. And that's a hard pill to swallow because a lot of times I get called up from managers saying, can you make my people more accountable? And I often say to them, well, what role do you think you play in their accountability? And my notion is the responsibility for understanding and remedying all of my 7 C's rests with management. So how can leaders improve accountability? Number one is walk your talk. Behavior speaks much louder than words, and integrity is the heart of leadership. And if you don't hold yourself accountable, you won't be able to hold your employees accountable. If you want employees to be happy with you, you need to be affirming them. And, some companies are really good at affirming people and some are not. So the next thing is genuinely care for your employees and demonstrate your caring. I coached one executive of a $100 million business, manufacturing and distribution, who was just too busy to know anything about his employees. And for a year, I pushed him to hire an executive assistant. And he finally did. And when he hired the executive assistant, I said, her job is to be your ambassador to the world. She needs to know everybody's birthday, everybody's anniversary, the names of their kids, the names of their spouse, the names of, what their hobbies are. And you need to be able to have her support you in writing short letters to these people, congratulating them on their birthdays, their anniversaries, their kids' graduations from school. And it really turned around his relationship with his workforce because his workforce always felt like he's too busy for us. He doesn't care about us. So why should we go the extra mile for him? The job of leadership is to address each of the 7 C's to find out what's going on and what needs to be done about it, and then do something. So I believe there needs to be a paradigm shift. And the paradigm shift is from holding people accountable and demanding accountability to holding ourselves accountable for inspiring people to be accountable. From just do your job, I don't want to hear any excuses, to no surprises, tell me what's going on, keep me informed, let me help remove roadblocks for you. The key to success in accountability is effective two-way dialogue to understand why people behave the way they do and what really matters to them. So here are some tips for leadership. Number one, create a great culture. One of the clients I worked with back in 2014 and the beginning of 2015 has grown his business in the past 5 years from $11 million to $110 million this year, 10x in 5 years. How did he do it? He created a great culture. He became the best place to work. He's got less than 5% turnover of employees. People love coming to work there. He's got leaders who have been with the business for multiple years. He's got a very strong team, and the result is his internal challenges are not getting in the way of his growth in the marketplace. So you need to make it safe for inquiry and two-way. You need to make it safe for inquiry and two-way dialogue. Make it safe for employees to be vulnerable with you by being vulnerable and approachable with them. And I'll say that again, if you're not vulnerable, they won't be vulnerable. If you're not approachable, they will never come to you with their problems. Your job is to create safety for interaction. Make it safe for employees to challenge authority and say what they think. Now you may say, why would I want employees challenging me? Because I'd much rather know what they think and be able to address their concerns than not know what they think and then wonder why they're not performing. Survey employees regularly to find out how they feel. Solicit their ideas for how you can improve the company and your leadership, and provide them with feedback saying, I heard your idea, here's why we're going to do it or not do it, or maybe we're going to do it at some future date. If you don't close the loop and let them know that they were heard, they won't continue to give you good ideas. Encourage employees to ask questions about assignments. Have clear core values and be a walking exemplar of them. If you don't model the core values, they won't. Your behavior speaks much louder than your words. And make work meaningful by communicating purpose and mission. So these are all the things you can do to create a great culture, and you need to be constantly monitoring it, because if you do it once and forget about it, it will tend towards chaos again. You need to constantly be vigilant about reinforcing core values, vigilant about making it safe to communicate. You've got to make it safe for people to come to you with their problems. They've got to be, it's got to be safe to say, I don't know how to do something. So ensuring clarity. Promote clarity instead of obscuring it. Ensure that all goals are SMART. SMART is the acronym for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. So if you can't measure it, you don't know whether you've done it or not. If it's not attainable, you're setting people up for failure. If it's not specific, it tends to be vague. If it's not time-bound, it's cloudy as to when it's got to be done by. So make your goals SMART. Be very clear about priorities. Also be clear about roles, responsibilities, and the limits of authority so people know when they can act on their own, when they need to get approval from you or from somebody else in the organization. Hold yourself responsible for the hearing of the listener. Don't assume that they got it because you said it. Be a good listener and let employees know you heard them, and encourage questions. Next one is to pay attention to capacity. Make it safe for employees to speak up about capacity issues and or confusion about priorities or overlapping deadlines. I can't tell you how many times bosses just issue orders as they think of them. Do this, do this, do this, do this. And the person is sitting there thinking, I now have 12 things on my list. What should I really get done this week? Or what can I drop? Or what can I delay? Or what can I delegate to someone else on the team? So ensure alignment about priorities and deadlines. Review your report's priority list each time you assign a new task. Help them determine what to delay, delegate, or drop. So you're in this together. You're not being surprised by what they choose not to do. Hold daily huddles to spot capacity overloads. Check in frequently to assess status and catch bottlenecks before they happen. So if you do all these things, if capacity is an issue, you'll know about it and you'll be able to address it with more resources or more people or changing deadlines. Next is build competence. Make it safe for employees to say they don't know how to do something. This is back on the vulnerability and approachability. If they think that they have to know how to do everything and they've got to always know all the answers, they're never going to come to you and say, I don't know how to do this, I need more training. Or I don't know how to do this, could you give it to someone else? So you've got to make it safe for them to say they don't know how to do something. Provide employees with ongoing training required to accomplish the tasks you assign to them. This may sound obvious, but tasks have a way of changing over time quickly. And you need to make sure that continuous learning is a part of every job and one of the core values of your company. It's your responsibility as a leader to ensure that employees have the competence required to successfully complete assigned tasks. Jobs often change and people are often asked to do things they were never trained to do. And you can't blame them if they haven't gotten the training. And don't blame employees if they lack the competence required to do a task. You hired them without the requisite skills and you failed to adequately train them. or you ask them to do something they were never hired to do in the first place or never trained to do. So look back at yourself and say, how can I ensure that they're competent so that they can go on to the next one and feel confident? So you need to make it safe for employees to fail or ask for guidance as long as they can learn from their mistakes and they don't repeat them. If it's not safe to fail, what's going to happen is people will hide failures from you, or they won't take chances. They won't be creative. They won't do anything they're not sure they can do. You know, it used to be said that that nobody in a large company could ever get fired for buying IBM. Well, the answer is they were playing it safe. If they bought some unknown product, they could be criticized for it. But if they bought IBM, how could they be wrong when it was the biggest seller back then? You have to make it your job to build the confidence of your employees. One of the ways you do this is with ongoing coaching and encouragement. And another way you do it is with giving lots of positive feedback and communicating your appreciation often. So they feel acknowledged, they feel successful, they feel they feel the weight of your positive feedback, and it dramatically outweighs your criticisms. A good rule of thumb is 5 positive comments for every negative one. Years ago, I coached at ConAgra Foods, and I spent 4 years coaching all 4 levels of senior management there, starting with the very top of the house and working down to the vice presidents. And we went presidents, then EVPs, then SVPs, then VPs. And one of the exercises they gave them was a 10-dime exercise. The culture before we started there had been a workaholic culture in which nobody was ever thanked for doing anything positive. And a new CEO came in and wanted to change the culture. So the first thing he did was create core values. And one of the ways he reinforced the core value was to say to everybody on his team, put 10 dimes in your right pocket. And every time you catch somebody doing something successfully, give them a sincere compliment that's close to the event. The closer to the event, the better. Thank them for doing a good job and move 1 dime from your right pocket to the left pocket. And then at the end of the day, count and see how many times you've actually moved dimes from your right pocket to your left pocket, because that'll tell you how many times you've given positive comments during the day, as opposed to just waiting until somebody screws up and then giving them, harsh criticism. It turns out that if you give them mostly positive feedback, when you have a negative criticism to give them, they can take it in stride because they know you're there for them. They know you appreciate them. They know you acknowledge them. They know you feel good about them. And they can take criticism in stride as being developmental, as helping them do a better job. If all you give them is criticism, they don't look forward to you coming around, and they don't look forward to working for you. Last but not least, or I shouldn't say almost last but not least, is commitment. I call it the heart of the matter. If you're not committed to your employees, they won't be committed to you. And you need to demonstrate your commitment with everything you do. You need to demonstrate your commitment to their growth, their development, their families, their well-being. You've got to help them make progress in their careers. You've got to care about their personal lives. You need to know something about their family, their hobbies, whatever matters to them. You need to remember their birthdays and anniversaries. You need to acknowledge and appreciate employees as often as possible, but do it sincerely. Nobody gets too much praise. And you need to make it your mission to have employees go home feeling good about themselves and feeling important to you and the company. The last thing you want them to do is go home feeling like a failure and feeling like they don't matter. So if you have people feel good about themselves and important to you and the company, chances are they're going to love their jobs and they're going to tell everybody how they should come to work for you. So last but not least is compensation. For those of you who are GI coaches, you know that Jack Welch said, pay the most and hire the best. And Goldman Sachs made that their policy years ago. And when I was going to business school, everybody at Harvard Business School wanted to go to work for Goldman Sachs because they paid the most and they hired the best. And people would line up from the top 7 or 8 business schools in the country to get job interviews at Goldman Sachs, because if you went to Goldman Sachs and you killed yourself for 7 years, at the end of 7 years you made partner and you were a millionaire. And back then $1 million was a lot of money, a lot more than it is today. In fact, to put it in perspective, starting salaries for business school graduates from the top schools was about $20,000. Today it's closer to $200,000. So $1 million was a lot of money back then. And basically what Goldman said is we want the best people and we're going to pay for the best. And when you look at sports teams, the only thing that distinguishes one team from the other is the players on the team and the coach who works with the team. So your job is to have the best players on your team. So when you're hiring people, you need to, first of all, make it safe for people to bring up compensation issues. At a lot of companies, you can't discuss your compensation with anyone. And if you talk to another employee about it, you get fired. Well, there's all kinds of websites right now that tell you what the competitors are paying and what jobs are worth. And people are much better informed today than they used to be. So you should also consider non-monetary perks when creating a comp plan. Pay attention to what matters most to your employees, flex time, working from home, or whatever. But it may be different for different people, but among the millennial generation, flex time and working from home is a perk that's very important to them. Create a comp plan that rewards both individual and team performance, so they're pulling for the team, not just for themselves. Be open and fair in your compensation. Make sure it compares favorably to that of your competition. Again, you want to get the best people, you need to be at the top of the pay scale. Be very clear about job expectations regarding how many hours per week an employee is expected to work. You can come up with any agreement that they agree to, but you need to have this conversation up front. If you take this job, you need to know that it's going to be X. And if it's 60 hours a week and it means working nights and weekends, then they need to know that up front and sign up for the social contract that says yes to that. Don't tell them it's going to be a 40-hour job week and then expect them to work 65 hours. So this is all about managing expectations and having people opt in for what's expected. And then be very, very clear how performance will be measured. At Gazelles and Gravitas Impact, we use job scorecards, and the job scorecard specifies what constitutes good performance and how it's going to be measured. We have to look at how often will an employee be reviewed, what's the basis for the review, does a review constitute a review of salary as well, or is it strictly a review of performance? So some companies review performance quarterly and review salaries once a year. But it's important that employees understand when and how often you're going to review performance. So in conclusion, hold yourself accountable for the accountability of your employees. You should understand what's driving their behavior and realize that it's your responsibility to address the root causes. If you really understand what's going on, then you can fix it. If you don't understand what's going on, you're unlikely to fix it. Assume that their behavior is logical to them. Make it your mission to attract and retain the best talent by really caring about them and demonstrating your caring in everything you do. It's up to you to inspire accountability. And as Michaela said, my book is coming out tomorrow on Amazon. The ebook is going to be free for the first 4 days from April 9th to April 12th. And all you need to do is go to Amazon.com, look for books, and when you get to books, go to Inspire Accountability, and you'll find my book there. The paperback is for sale, but the ebook is for free until Friday. So I'm open to questions and comments, and if anyone has any questions about what I've shared with you, here's your opportunity.
All right. Well, Ken, it doesn't look like we have any questions or comments coming in from the attendees. But is there anything else you want to share about how you've seen this shift throughout the years as you've been working, how you've seen the change in culture shift?
Yeah, well, so what I'm finding out particularly, I think high-tech firms get it best. I think the firms that I've worked with that are digital marketing firms or IT service firms or even some of the staffing firms, I've been working with a lot of staffing firms, have completely redesigned their offices to be very user-friendly. They have couches for nap breaks if you want them. They've got ping pong tables. They've got games to play. They've got snack rooms. So, there's a whole art to designing an office. There's one office I went to where they had little scooters at the front door so you could be playful and scoot around this huge office complex because it was better than having to walk long distances. So I think the key here is know your audience. If your audience is millennials, and I've got several clients now where almost all the workers are millennials. If your office is millennials, then cater to them. Figure out what matters to them and give them what they care about most. And what I found is that it's not just compensation. If all you focus on is how much you pay them, you miss an opportunity to reward them in ways that matter more to them than money. And really talk to them. I think that they want to have a peer relationship with the boss, not a hierarchical relationship. They don't want to be told what to do. They want to be given opportunities to take responsibility and do things. And it's up to you to encourage them um, to exert leadership, encourage them to take initiative, encourage them to take chances. And if it means they fail, encourage them to learn from the failure experiences, because there are too many environments where failure is taboo. And if you go out to Silicon Valley, they feel like a CEO isn't bankable until he's failed at least once. It's like they want people to learn from failure. Whereas when I grew up, it wasn't that way. If you failed, there was a tarnish around your name, and you couldn't go back and compete again. So I think it's very important that people realize the culture of the times is very, very different. And it looks like it's moving increasingly in that direction, particularly as millennials take over leadership roles. And I'm working with some companies now where there are millennials leading the business, and they get it, and they're going to outcompete the ones that don't. Any other questions, Michaela, or anybody else listening?
All right, well, if we don't have any other questions or comments coming in from the attendees, we'll go ahead and wrap up here. So as Ken said, his ebook is free on Amazon from April 9th through 12th. For those of you in the Gravitas Impact community, I'll be uploading that link to Yammer with the uploaded version of this video and the PDF version of the slide deck. For those of you who are not part of that community, we will also be putting the video on YouTube. So I'll send that link to Ken, and he can send out to his mailing list just so that everyone has access to this webinar. And then, like he said, the ebook will be available for free on Amazon from April 9th to 12th. Ken, anything else you'd like to add?
Well, just my email address is on the screen. If anybody has questions after this is over, please send me an email and let me know your concerns, okay?
All right.
So thank you, Michaela. Thank you for listening, everybody.